Hi everyone, and welcome back to Morning Cup. I'm so glad you're here today because this is one of my favorite weeks this week because tomorrow is International Women's Day. And to honor that, I really wanted to focus in on how do we break the glass ceiling? It's been broken, but how do we continue to do so? And this week's quote to really start us off powerfully is, "The glass ceiling that once limited a woman's career path has paved a new road towards business ownership, where women can utilize their sharp business acumen while building strong family ties." And that quote is by Erica Nicole, and she started YFS magazine after she left corporate America. And I love this because it just shows that women can have it all. We can have our business, we can have family, friends, and build a beautiful life. And that's what she's attesting to because we are so capable. And being able to not feel like we have to do what society says or what our family says what we have to do, but what we truly deep down inside want to do and build that life for ourselves. And it's about that women empowerment. However, sometimes we get in our own way. There's a factor of self-sabotage where we don't think we're good enough, or that the roadblocks that have happened stop us from achieving what we would love to achieve. And today we're talking about self-sabotage to self-empowerment and how you can go from one to the other. And so starting with, what are the signs of self-sabotage? How do you find out what self-sabotage is happening to you? What does that look like? Well, the first thing is you're critical of yourself. So there's a lot of negative self-talk. You're just putting yourself down or not feeling like you're good enough. That's one of the signs. The second one is procrastination. So a lot of times we procrastinate because we're like, well, I'll get it done, or last minute, or I'm better under pressure, and then it doesn't get done or something happens. But that's a form of self-sabotage. The next one is negativity. Negativity around you, whether it's what you're telling yourself, what you're experiencing. There's a lot of negativity versus looking at the positive of things. And there can be positive toxicity, but it's really about finding that balance of understanding when it becomes an issue with the negativity. And the next one is imposter syndrome. So feeling like a fraud when you know you can achieve something, but part of you is just feeling like you're a fraud. And I feel like every entrepreneur I've ever met has this experience of imposter syndrome where every time they level up, this creeps in, where you just don't feel good enough, or you feel like, can I really do this? Or is this really going to make it? But a lot of times we experience that as we're leveling up because it's a new chapter, it's a new experience. We might have never experienced it before. Most likely we've never experienced it before. And the last one is questioning your purpose. So a lot of times we might start looking at ourselves as, again, it comes back to this core of not being good enough, but really allowing yourself to achieve something, but thinking, okay, well, is this really what I'm meant to do? If something doesn't work out, then we might automatically question it, and then the negativity comes in. Because I do think all of these play a factor in one another and are intertwined, but these are the things to really look at. So look at these signs. Are you self-sabotaging your future? So there's different types of self-sabotage. And the first one is perfectionism. So we might have really high expectations of ourselves. It's great to have standards. It's great to be like, this is what I want to do and achieve, and I'm going to. But when perfectionism creeps in, that is a form of self-sabotage because you're not allowing yourself to grow and make mistakes. And we've talked about that a lot because it's important. But when we let go of the perfectionism, we're allowed to still have those standards, but not holding ourselves to this expectation and then being really rude to ourselves and mean to ourselves. And I've asked this before, but would you ever say that to your best friend, what you say to yourself? Really ask yourself that. The second thing is self-care. So not feeling like you can take any more breaks. So no more break time. You just feel like it's not worth it because you have so much going on and you're like, well, I'll get to it later, or I'll take a break later. But that can be a form of self-sabotage. Or on the flip side, you take so many breaks and you're like, well, I need self-care, and it becomes a crutch versus having that balance and knowing when you need to push forward or when you need to step back. And that's the balance of it. And the next one is time and energy. So instead of reinventing the wheel, being able, sometimes people will be like, well, I want to create the new wheel, and taking from what you already know and building upon that. It's going to save you time and energy instead of sabotaging what could be. And the next one is relationships. So a lot of times, especially in after you've gotten your heart broken, it's really hard to recover from that. And there's a lot of fear, a fear of rejection, or not even wanting to put yourself out there. Sometimes people will be so focused on work that they won't put themselves on a dating app or won't put themselves out there because they don't want to be rejected. So instead of being rejected, they just might make the excuse of, I'm too busy to date, or I don't have time, or when I'm this age, I'll start dating, or when I have this accomplished, I'll start dating. But a lot of times underneath that is the fear. And the next one is broken trust. If you've ever been cheated on or have had a relationship where a partner has had an affair, or anything along those lines, it can really break that trust. And with that broken trust, it's really hard to move on. And then self-sabotage can come into play because instead of putting yourself out there again, this trust, it's really hard to build trust again with somebody new. And the high expectations, again, it's having all the standards of what you expect from a partner. However, is it too high? Asking yourself those questions. One thing I did when I was looking for my partner was being able to say, okay, well, here's the list of qualities I want from somebody. And then I went through them. I'm like, well, do I have those qualities? And some of them I didn't. And that's when I started working on myself and really dating myself a few years ago to really understand where my expectations were and taking the expectations out and just looking at the core values instead of looking at the expectations. Contempt. So being just fine with what's going on, not wanting to move forward or remove the relationship or whatever it may be, but being able to just be perfectly fine the way it is and not growing or evolving either. And then the next one, defensiveness. So a lot of times when in relationships, when you're having an argument, or you will self-sabotage within the relationship because that's easier, or because you've been hurt, or instead of somebody doing something first, you're going to do it instead. So it protects you. It's like this armor that you wear instead. And moving into work. So this one is interesting too, because it's the low priority tasks versus the high priority tasks. So when we are so focused sometimes on the low end of things that need to get done, things that don't really need to be done right then and there, that is a form of self-sabotage. If you're not working on the higher priority stuff, that becomes untouched, undone, and that is a form. And within work as well, it's the overload causing unnecessary stress. So when we're causing all this unnecessary stress because we think we need to take on more projects, more things because we want to. Perfect example is when I first started my business, I was constantly networking. I love networking. I love people. But however, I was taking on so many extra projects of let me help this business, let me help this friend. And instead of focusing on what I needed to focus on, it caused so much more stress that was it was unnecessary for me. But really looking at what's your workload look like and how are you organizing your time and energy around that? And so what are the root causes of self-sabotage? What really is underneath all of that? Because we have all these different things, different types and situations, but when we get to the root of it, the first thing is lack of self-worth. We don't feel like we deserve it or we're worthy of anything that we're receiving. So we do self-sabotage because of that. The second one is there's this need for control. And this is huge because a lot of times instead of something happening to us, we're going to control the whole environment, control the whole situation to whatever we can. And when we do that, that can negate really what's supposed to happen and being able to move forward instead of releasing that control and letting things flow the way they need to. You need to do the work, of course, but we can't control things. There's the only things that we can control are our thoughts, our opinions, our desires, and our actions and behaviors. But outside of that, we can't control other people. We can't control what they're going to say and do, but really being able to look at ourselves and what are we trying to control? Is there a need for control? And asking yourself that question. And the next one is fear of failure. So a lot of times the sabotage comes in because we don't want to fail, especially if you are a former perfectionist like me, or a people pleaser. We just don't want to let people down. And that can really formulate into sabotaging ourselves to really, instead of empowering ourselves. And the last one is fear of success. So just the opposite. we start to level up, like the imposter syndrome we were talking about earlier. Being able to understand too that when we're leveling up, it's okay to, and it's part of that breaking that ceiling of what we can achieve and what we can accomplish, and being able to be okay with that. But those are the 4 main root causes of self-sabotage. So now, what can you do to stop the self-sabotage? The first thing is identify the function of the self-sabotage behaviors in your life. So what are you doing? What are the actions you're taking every day? So for instance, if you are overworking yourself, maybe there's this fear of success. So your hands are in so many projects where you think, well, I'm doing all these things, so if one thing doesn't work out, I'm not a failure. I'm reaching my success. Could be one or the other. The next thing is identify and define your values. So what are your core values? So when we're able to identify those, that can help us, especially in our relationships, our work ethic, and life, and the balance of it all. But being able to know, okay, these are the values I stand by, I perform by, and I connect on. And when we're able to do that, we can truly stop the self-sabotage and understand how it is hindering our growth. And the third one is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So when we're understanding the fact that we're growing and evolving, when we get comfortable with we don't have control, we don't know what's going to happen. All we know is what we're doing, taking those action steps, small steps every day towards what we want to do, and empowering ourselves to do that. And of course, the last one, speak up. This is the ultimate empowerment. Speak up if something is bothering you. Speak up if you need to communicate with your partner or your family member or your friend or your coworker or your clients, your customers, anyone in your life that is hindering that self-sabotage. So I think it's really important too, just to understand when we are communicating clearly and effectively, it can really help us remove that sabotage and understand, one, where it comes from and identifying it and then doing something about it. So I hope that was helpful, and it really, really just want you to focus in on empowering yourselves this week and moving forward, of course, but really this week in particular, to break that glass ceiling, to focus on the path that's not walked as much, but being able to understand too that the value you bring and not allowing yourself to devalue yourself. So I hope you have a great rest of your day. Make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.